The night was supposed to be one of Hollywood's most carefully curated celebrations. Glittering lights, champagne towers, and a guest list tighter than a royal vault. Yet, in a twist that felt more like a badly written sitcom than an Emmy-worthy script, Meghan Markle appeared at the HBO Max Emmy celebration, uninvited, a smile on her face, as if she belonged. What she didn't anticipate was how fast that smile would wither, once the room turned colder than an ice bucket challenge. She had convinced herself this was the perfect moment to reclaim the spotlight, but instead, it became the night Hollywood collectively voted her off the island. From the very instant she crossed the ballroom threshold, the energy shifted. Conversations stalled. Mid-sentence laughter thinned into awkward silence, and then came the cutting whisper, sharp enough to slice through the velvet drapes. "Oh no, not her." It wasn't muttered in a corner, it was loud enough to ripple across the room like a stone skipping over water. That one remark didn't just break the tension, it set the entire hall buzzing, as if everyone suddenly agreed on a single truth: Meghan wasn't welcome here. And yet the irony was thick. This was the woman who once dazzled red carpets with royal fanfare, who could turn a camera lens into a personal fan club. Now she was no longer seen as a duchess or even a celebrity. She was the unwanted guest, a walking reminder of how far a star can fall. Like an actress crashing a film set after her character had already been killed off, Meghan tried to force her way into a narrative that had moved on without her. She imagined this entrance would be her triumphant Hollywood re-entry cameras, flashing journalists, scribbling industry titans, nodding with polite approval. Instead, she received the cruelest reaction Hollywood can deliver. Not shock, not awe, but disdain. The polite claps never came. The only applause, if you could call it that, was the sound of muffled groans and discreet laughter shared behind manicured hands. If there were an Emmy category for most cringeworthy cameo, Meghan would have walked away with the trophy. She thought she was staging a power move, but all she staged was her own humiliation. But the truth didn't stop there. The whispered remark was only the opening act. What followed was the kind of silent, collective rejection that even seasoned Hollywood insiders described as surgical. Within seconds, Meghan found herself not just ignored, but actively avoided, as though her presence carried the same risk as stepping on a red carpet in last season's shoes. Zendaya, radiant and mid-conversation with her stylists, executed a pivot so flawless it could have been choreographed, her eyes never once grazing Meghan's direction, her assistant suddenly promoted to Lifeline in a performance of feigned importance. And then came Pedro Pascal, the man of the hour, who had been laughing loudly with colleagues until Meghan edged closer. His laugh dissolved mid-sentence. He excused himself with the smoothness of an actor dodging paparazzi, slipping away toward the bar with the urgency of someone who'd just remembered an urgent phone call. The stylists, usually eager for a photo or a quote, buried their faces in drinks menus, while journalists who would normally beg for a soundbite treated her like an allergy trigger. One glance too long and they might break out in hives. It wasn't accidental. Nobody wanted to be photographed with her, one insider later revealed. In Hollywood, association is currency, and Meghan's stock has tanked. That single line captured the brutal truth once Meghan had traded on her royal connections, her fame, her aura of being untouchable. But now her image was no longer valuable. It was a liability. In a town built on optics, even a smile in her direction looked like career sabotage. The irony: Hollywood is notorious for playing nice even when enemies collide. Fake hugs, fake compliments, fake camaraderie, it's all part of the show. Yet on this night, Meghan managed to do what few others could: unite an entire room in coordinated avoidance. She became the empty chair at a banquet present, but pointedly unused, a silent prop everyone stepped around without acknowledging. If Meghan thought she would find allies in her once powerful circle, Oprah, Gayle King, even the handful of stylists who once worshipped her designer gowns, she couldn't have been more mistaken. Bridges that had once seemed unshakable had quietly burned, and all that remained was a cloud of indifference too thick to pierce. For Meghan, it wasn't rejection by one or two individuals, it was rejection by the entire room. And nothing stings more than realizing the whole industry has collectively decided that you are no longer worth the spotlight. The room froze in that moment. Not literally, of course, but in the way atmospheres shift when someone is quietly, yet unmistakably being put in their place. While nominees toasted with vintage champagne and producers clinked glasses in celebration, Meghan was escorted to a discreet seat near the exit corridor, far from the stage, far from the spotlight. It wasn't a dramatic removal. No security dragging her out. No scandalous confrontation, but it was worse she was present yet deliberately sidelined as though the organizers had decided her punishment would be irrelevance. Her glass didn't sparkle with champagne bubbles. Instead, it was filled with plain water, the kind of detail that screamed louder than any headline. Once upon a time, she had been showered with Dom Perignon at palace banquets, yet here she sat with a glass of tap water at one of Hollywood's biggest nights. Symbolism rarely comes this sharp, and it cut deep. Every detail seemed orchestrated to minimize her existence. No red carpet entrance, no official press photos, no seat at a central table where networking could save face. Instead, Meghan was left at the margins in a shadowed corner where photographers' lenses deliberately skipped her, where the glamour of the room shone brighter simply because she was excluded from it. She had come hoping to command attention, but all she received was a calculated effort to make her invisible. For insiders, this wasn't just Hollywood being cruel, it was Hollywood sending a message. She wasn't a guest, one source whispered later. She was a problem. And problems in this town aren't spotlighted. They're quietly relocated to corners where they can do the least damage. Meghan had tried to crash the show like a starlet demanding a cameo, but the industry responded by downgrading her to an extra in her own scene. And there she remained, watching the laughter, the flashes, the toasts, without being part of any of it. Her carefully chosen gown, her calculated smile, her attempt at reclaiming relevance, all of it rendered meaningless by a glass of water and a seat that screamed exile. The once duchess, the once actress, the once media darling, now reduced to a background blur in a celebration she had no role in. Meanwhile, on the other side of town, the real erasure had already begun. Not in the ballroom, but in the back rooms of press agencies and PR firms where Hollywood decides who exists and who doesn't. By the next morning, glossy photo galleries of the Emmy celebration flooded social media featuring Zendaya in glitter, Pedro Pascal in charm, and every relevant name basking in the glow. But Meghan, she was nowhere. It was as though she had never set foot in the room. Getty, Shutterstock, the wire services, all of them published galleries that conveniently cropped her out or shelved the photos entirely. Even when she was clearly visible in background shots, frames were tightened just enough to delete her presence, like an extra cut from the final edit of a film. For someone who built her post-royal career on controlling optics, this was more brutal than any booing. It wasn't just rejection, it was obliteration. Her team, desperate to salvage something, pushed their own photos to the agency's carefully lit images designed to make her look like she belonged. But the wires refused to buy in. Nobody wanted to run Meghan's photos from an event she wasn't invited to, one publicist explained flatly. It would look like an endorsement. In other words, she had become untouchable. And here lies the cruelest irony. Meghan has always thrived in controlled environments, from the Netflix docuseries polished to perfection, to the Oprah interview cut like a courtroom testimony. But the Emmy celebration wasn't her show, and in that space she had no editing rights. Hollywood was the director, and they made sure her cameo was cut in post-production. To the public, this silence was louder than any headline. Meghan had walked into that ballroom hoping to trend as the glamorous surprise of the night, but instead she trended in whispers. Did you see her? No, exactly. Like a ghost wandering through a party, she was present in the moment, but absent in the record. For a woman who once commanded cameras, this was the most devastating punishment of all invisibility. This was the moment everyone held their breath. Not because Meghan had dazzled, but because her entire post-royal narrative seemed to collapse in real time. The Emmys fiasco wasn't just another awkward evening. It became a defining failure, the kind that cements reputations rather than salvages them. Industry insiders whispered that it was one of the worst PR disasters of her career, a turning point where even sympathy evaporated, leaving only collective exhaustion. Her track record offered no safety net. The Spotify deal had already ended in embarrassment, her rebranded podcast struggled to gain traction, and her so-called lifestyle brand remained so vague that even devoted fans couldn't describe what it actually offered. For someone banking on reinvention, every project had fizzled before finding momentum. The Emmys were supposed to be her reset button. Instead, they exposed how little she had left to reset. And yet Meghan had entered that ballroom convinced she would reclaim Hollywood's attention. She had likely imagined headlines reading Meghan Markle stuns with surprise appearance, her photos splashed across glossy magazines, her name back in the trending cycle. But reality delivered the opposite. She wasn't celebrated, she wasn't even tolerated. She was quietly escorted to the margins, erased from the narrative, and collectively dismissed by a room that had once applauded her. It was brutal, but it was also symbolic. Meghan wanted relevance by proximity, believing that showing up among Hollywood's elite would reestablish her as one of them. But Hollywood saw through it. A smile, a gown, a dramatic entrance, none of it could mask the truth. She had nothing new to contribute, no project to celebrate, no real seat at the table. What was supposed to be a power move ended as a spectacle of desperation. In the end, she did trend, but not in the way she intended. The whispers turned into jokes, the avoidance became a story of its own, and the absence of her image in official coverage spoke louder than any caption. Meghan Markle wanted a comeback, but what she staged was a cautionary tale. Her star power didn't just dim that night, it flickered out, leaving only the cold reminder that in Hollywood, invisibility is the cruelest cut of all.